What's up, Internet? It is the end of 2018, and, well, I'm literally recording this a few hours before it's over. This December has been a little bit, trying more than others, and they're all pretty busy. But I can tell you this, now that 2018 is over, I can say, good. It has not been an easy year for me. Between losing my ad revenue, losing my job, a bunch of family issues, family health issues, and a whole crap load of other things, it's been tough. But fortunately, video games. Video games are good, and video games have helped me through a lot of things I've had to deal with this year, and because I make videos on the internet about video games, it is my contractual obligation to you to bring you a list of easily digestible information that tells you the best games I played this year. New, old, doesn't matter as long as the first time I've played it was this year, 2018. But before we get into the list proper, I want to give 3 honorary special mention slots to Tokyo Mirage Session, #FE, a game that was originally marketed as Fire Emblem Cross Shin Megami Tensei. I was expecting more of a turn-based strategy RPG with some, like, team-building aspects, you know, like actual Fire Emblem Cross with Shin Megami Tensei. Instead, what we basically got was Persona, but with the personas named after Fire Emblem Awakening characters. It was a little underwhelming, and I gotta say the extra thrown-in idle nonsense didn't really do it for me, but, you know, it was a bright, colorful game, and the RPG action was fun, and I really like how one character's attacks can flow into a second character's attacks, and there was sort of like a great sort of synergy system in between your characters. That was a lot of fun, and even though I haven't gotten very, very far in this game, it immediately struck a chord with me, and hey, the Wii U finally has like a 4th game worth owning for it. So there's also that, although to be fair, Monster Hunter is slightly less relevant on it, so I'm taking that off, so still, 3 games. Still, Wii U's got another game worth owning on it. Hooray! Alright, second honorary mention slot goes to Octopath Traveler on the Switch. Yes, finally the Switch actually has a good game, and it's basically about as old school an RPG as you can get, but it's a great idea. And when I first heard the idea of a RPG with a bunch of different characters running around recruiting each other and advancing their own plots, I immediately thought, oh god, it's another Saga game, isn't it? And instead of getting an awkward thing that has basically no direction that you kind of have to fumble about for hours before you have any idea what you're supposed to do, you actually have a pretty well-designed RPG. And you know, I like the idea of basically handpicking your team. I like the idea of seeing which characters work well with one another. I like the idea of constantly wearing down your opponent's defenses by using more and more of their weaknesses. There is a lot here that I really, really like. And then the final special mention slot goes to Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders FX on the Super Famicom. One of the fastest fighting games I've played on the Super Nintendo, and one of the things that makes it so interesting and deep, it's also like a management sim and also a virtual pet raising game and also kind of an RPG with stat allocation. And you know, it's one of the best fighting games I've played for the time. All it took to make a fighting game interesting to me was, you know, add elements from other games I like. Sounds like a really obvious thing in hindsight, but still, great game. Alright, now let's kick off this list proper with number 10, Spider-Man. Alright, I think I need to clarify and say, I'm not the biggest comic book fan. Back in the day, all I read was Sonic the Hedgehog comics by Archie, but I gotta say, I always liked Spider-Man, and I loved Spider-Man's games, even though really not many of them were all that good. And I think we finally found a proper successor to Spider-Man 2 on the GameCube. But, as a huge plus to me, no Tobey Maguire! Seriously, that guy was a terrible Spider-Man, and as much as I like to make fun of Yuri Lowenthal for being in everything, he is kind of the perfect Spider-Man. He's got that sort of nerdy, dorky, everyone and their little sister can beat him up quality to him, but he also has the wisecrack and web-slinger down too. Oh, yeah, and the most important thing, web-slinging and combat are amazing. I have 100% this game, and I've still jumped in every now and then just to swing around the city. It's very visceral, it feels like you're there, and it just works and is enjoyable, and it's incredibly immersive. That said, if I had one complaint about this game, I'm pretty sure this is the only Spider-Man game with costumes that doesn't have the symbiote suit. That said, you can dress up as my boy the Scarlet Spider, which, as we all know, is the best Spider-Man, so it's a fair trade-off, I guess, but it just seems weird not to include the symbiote suit. Alright, next we are moving on to number 9, with Mach-In X. Man, we started the year off good with this one. A first-person action game where you play as a psychic sword who possesses people. I'm about 80 different flavors of intrigued and impressed with this one. Even though my Dreamcast is a little worse for wear, this at the very least gave me a good Dreamcast game, because I mean everything else I have is like 7th Cross Evolution and Blue Stinger. Yeah, this is like my one good Dreamcast game, but it's a damn good Dreamcast game. Running around hacking and slashing people up in like a first-person environment, ridiculously fun, and while it is pretty awkward on the Dreamcast controller, I will admit that, it still seems to work pretty well. And I think there was a remake of this on the PS2, so I may have to track that one down. Moving on to number 8. We have Kamiwaza. I got an import PS2 earlier this year, and I need some games for it. This one seemed like the most interesting out of the bunch, however. It's kind of like if you took Thief the Dark Project, one of my favorite PC games of all time, and made it very, very Japanese. You run around in third person trying to steal everything that isn't nailed down or on fire. You can outmaneuver your opponents in a cartwheel cloud of rainbow sparkles to just completely confuse them. This game does not seem to take itself very seriously, and I really appreciate it. It's incredibly creative, very, very fun, and stealth and thieving games are just fun when they're not stupid. Thief 4. Alright, next we have number 7, Shiren the Wanderer. This is a Wii game I've wanted for such a long time, even though I'm not the biggest rogue-style fan. And, you know, I'm not the biggest rogue-style fan, but I had an absolute blast playing this game. Running around in randomized dungeons and building up your character, fighting random monsters, trying to not get murdered by traps, and finding all sorts of items and equipment to boost your character up is so engaging and fun that, well, I think this game is a must-have for anyone who likes dungeon crawling and has a Wii. The only problem is its ungodly cost and rarity, but man, it is an absolute fun game. If you can find this game for a decent price, you absolutely should, because it is a great little time sink, and it's made with a mode that actually makes it approachable for people who are bad at or don't enjoy these kinds of games, and how random and instantaneously it can take you back to the start with nothing. Seriously, if you don't like that, this game's got you covered either way. Number 6, yet another new game on this list. We have Monster Hunter World. I've always been a big Monster Hunter fan, and this one has fixed, well, 2 of my problems with the series. There's still a few there, but at the very least, it is now no longer a game about running from miniature little areas with awkward loading areas to bigger maps. Okay, still, I'm waiting for it to actually turn to a giant, persistent open world, but at least we're working towards that. And hey, the monsters are actually decently leveled this time, so that you don't necessarily have to be with a giant team to take down anything if you don't want to be. And if you do want help, you can just fire out a flare and random people will join you and usually not completely die immediately. Which is good because, you know, if you're not into the social obligation of trying to build a team and get to know people and stuff, you can still take advantage of social bonuses, which is great. That said, there are a few problems. For one thing, my favorite monster isn't in this game. Add Legiacris, damn it. Second of all, why is there still no vanity slots in this game? I get that this armor is like the best for what I'm trying to do, but I want to wear the Ice Dragon armor. It's so cool looking. Seriously, add a vanity slot. It's not that hard. And of course, you know, make it like a proper open, fully persistent world. That would be awesome. Only other thing I can think is there's a few issues with the transition from the previous iterations to now, such as having an unlimited use whetstone, which I appreciate, kind of defeating the purpose of catching fish that act as whetstones. I don't know about that. But you know what you do get is probably one of the most accessible Monster Hunter games, and probably one of the most enjoyable ones. Moving on to number 5, we go from hunting monsters to partying with them, with Monster Party on the NES. This is one of the weirdest things I've seen on the NES, because by all rights, it should not exist. We have a game that at one point has a freaking stroke, and probably made kids all collectively pee themselves when they saw this. We have moments where you are welcome to hell, have to fight the Grim Reaper, and have to fight, like, naked legs sticking out of the ground. What is up with this game? It is completely random, out of place, and doesn't feel like it applies to any of Nintendo's policies at the time or even now, and yet it's amazing. I think this is an absolute must-have, and a complete sleeper hit. Sure, I don't have many NES games. I have like maybe 12, but this is easily one of my favorites. Not just because of how weird it is, that's a great part of it though, but also because it is a great challenge and there's just so much to it. So much that's unexpected, so much that kind of changes things up, so much that just defies expectations entirely. This is a game that cannot be expected, and it's amazing for it. Moving on to number 4, we have Death Duel. One of the most generic sounding names ever. It is also absolutely amazing. It is a first-person gladiatorial surgery simulator where you have to take apart your giant alien monster opponents limb by freaking limb in order to wow the crowd into giving you money so you can continue to do your job. Nothing about this sounds bad at all. The only thing I don't like about it, honestly, is there's 1 or 2 parts that get ridiculously difficult, and there are these weird, like, qualifying first-person shooter segments that don't quite mesh with the rest of the game. Combine that with some technical issues, certainly it's not the most well-made game, but man is it fun. This is easily one of the best Genesis games I've played, second only perhaps to the legendary Ernest Evans. Next we have number 3, Hamtaro Ham Hams Unite. I went into this not really knowing what to expect, but I had heard it was pretty good. Never been much of a fan of the anime, and I gotta say, this game is great. It is sort of like a combination text-based adventure and point-and-click adventure on the Game Boy Color. You play a little hamster who has to develop his ham linguistic skills in order to convince other hamsters to come back with him to have like a hamster party. Or maybe they're having a hamster monster party, I'm not sure. But regardless, you have a fun game with great exploration, fantastic characters, and a lot of depth, even though there's only about 6 areas to the game. And even though there's really no threat or conflict or anything, it still presents you with a great deal of challenge in having to translate and solve problems. I gotta admit, this little Game Boy Color game has impressed me beyond measure. Moving on to number 2, we have Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. I think I can pretty much sum up how I feel about this game by saying, right now I'm in Chapter 4. By this point, you should be maybe 2 or 3 hours into the game. You could probably finish the chapter by 5 hours pretty easily. Yeah, I've got like 60 hours in this game at this point. I've been busy building up my Digimon, de-evolving them, and then building them up again just to see all the different types and permutations I can get and how I can combine abilities to get like the ultimate Digimon, even though my team can't even handle Digimon of these levels yet. For some reason, I just love this sort of thing. It takes me back to Digimon Dusk on the DS, where you could get your monster up to level 100 and then roll them back to level 1 and keep 10% of your stats. There was no point to ever do that, but still, I love doing it there. I love doing it here, even though the stat allocation is not the same, and that makes me kind of sad. Still, I gotta admit, this is a great RPG, and I do have a digital copy of the sequel now. I am very excited to, when I finally finish this, move on to that one. But great game, and very excited to continue playing the series. And finally, number 1. Well, it was my most wanted game for many, many years. And it might not have hit all of the notes I would have liked it to, but we have Run Saber on the Super Nintendo. This is basically Super Nintendo's answer to Strider. And I loves me my Strider. Basically, you pick your character, you run into a world, and then you try and hack and slash all the different weird monsters and enemies, and fight through some really incredible climactic battles and really interesting fights. And if you like Strider, this one's basically a must-have on the Super Nintendo. Not that you have a lot of choice if you only have a Super Nintendo and you want to play Strider. That said, this game isn't entirely Strider, it is very much its own thing, and I think it does well for recognizing that. But Run Saber is an amazing Super Nintendo game, and I think that barring its ungodly cost and rarity, it's still a great game, and it's an absolute must-have, and by far the game I've enjoyed the most this year. And that has been my top 10 games of 2018, but we're not quite done yet because I want to hear about yours. That's what the comments section is for. I want to hear about the great games I missed out on this year, so that if I can actually get some money sometime in my future, I might be able to check them out and tell you guys more about it. Although at that point, it's just preaching to the choir, right? Still, I'm excited to hear about all the awesome games I've missed out on because I know there have been a lot. And if you want to see more awesome stuff feel free to subscribe to the show and check out my Patreon to help support me, especially when things are not looking all that great for me right now, and this will seriously help continue to fund the show so that I can do awesome things like this. Plus, you'll get yourself on the Patreon supporters Discord where we can discuss Game of the Year stuff as we play them. Yeah, and trust me, lots of games to be played out there that I'm sure neither you nor I have played. So building up a dialogue to try and understand this greater world of video games, well, it just benefits everyone now, doesn't it? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a safe and wonderful new year. I also hope I have a safe and wonderful new year. It cannot possibly be as bad as last year, right? Right? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace out, Internet.